So the second step of creating that plan is when you and I discussed was your budget, right? I think you mentioned your budget. So how does that get incorporated into the whole goals discussion? Where do
Yeah.
you how do you know what is the right budget? Because this is another thing. So there is one of my favorite English sayings. When you ask somebody an open question that there's no definitive answer, they usually say, "Well, how long is a piece of string?" So you know, so if you set the wrong budget, and wrong could be because it's not enough, but it may be just falling short, and it's just as bad as not having enough of it. But you may be very close, and at the same time, you don't want to overspend it. Of course, money doesn't grow on trees. So, how do you know what is the right budget to set?
It's a good question. And there's a lot of different ways you can approach answering it. And I think it depends on where you are in your journey. But if we go back to that main goal, which is to identify all of the ways that somebody might search for your products, then we can work backwards from that, right? So if we need to go out and run research campaigns, depending on how long you've already been advertising, if you've been advertising for years and you have auto campaigns and broad match campaigns, you have a ton of valuable history in that account, and you have data that you can use to get a lot of the weight of search term isolation done in terms of separating all of your keywords into two buckets. Whereas if you're a brand new account, you're going to have to set some of your budget aside to do that research and figure out what are the ways people are searching for my products, how much are those cost per clicks, what is the search volume that's available on these keywords. And so it really depends on where you're at. But understanding that the goal is to identify everything first is step one. And then coming back to the triangle, you know, is your goal to understand all of these search terms and start to build out a plan as quickly as possible? And if it is, then you'll want to spend more upfront to do that research and get it out of the way. If your goal is to grow profitably and you don't want to waste any ad spend, you'll do a lot less research upfront and you can set that budget a lot lower. So it's tough to say, an exact number. And I think brands often want to know, like, how much of my revenue should I be spending on Amazon ads? And general, best practice is somewhere between 10 to 20% of your Amazon revenue could be a good starting point. But again, it really depends on a lot of factors, depends on the history of your account and how close you are essentially to having understood all of the ways that customers are searching for your products. But that's how I began. And so looking at what we call actually is a semantic map. That's something that we used to build in my agency. And the semantic map is essentially just a really detailed breakdown of all of the ways that people search for your product. So once you feel like that semantic map is built out and it's just essentially by product, like if I'm selling red sneakers, they might search by an attribute red, they might search by an attribute of sneakers, they might search by different colors. Figuring out what that semantic map looks like and then backfilling it with your historical data if you have it. That's what you're really looking for before you can start to turn things up on your performance keywords and start to ramp your spend.
Mhm. Okay, so it what you are saying is in order to know how much money to spend, first you have to spend a little bit on researching it.
Yep, exactly. It's the chicken before the egg. You have to spend a little bit at least in order to start getting a sense of how big the category is, how much volume is behind these keywords, right? If I told you today, we wanted to advertise on Bluetooth headphones, how much can you spend on that keyword in a given day? Could be, $100 for a low volume keyword. It could be $5. Could be $500,000 on a keyword like Bluetooth headphones. And so if you have no data to look at, it's very difficult to know how much, how many clicks you'll be able to drive to your product page and where you should set that budget. So it's really important to have at least some baseline of data. And if you don't have that, you're going to need to go get it before you can come up with a really strategic budget.
And what does that research budget look like usually?
So, if I'm working with a new brand who's really interested and moving quickly and wanting to learn and get into a rhythm where maybe they can plan out the next year of ad spend, we would dedicate probably 50 to 60% at least of the budget for the first month or two to research. And when I say research, I'm talking about auto campaigns that have been set up with the right product structure. So campaign structure is really important, especially as you're doing research. You want to group products together in your campaigns that are searched for similarly, right? So maybe they're not even variations on a product page, maybe they are, or maybe there's variations that would be searched for differently. Maybe you're a high volume apparel seller and search volume for red sneakers is very different than search volume for black sneakers. You might want to put those in separate campaigns so that your research is a little bit more segmented. And so starting with those auto and research campaigns, spend a majority of your budget there, let the data come in and make decisions quickly. You don't want to let these campaigns run wild. They can spend a lot of money. They can spend on unprofitable search terms. So you want to be reviewing your search term report daily if you're going to do a lot of research early on. That's my best recommendation. That way you can just quash things that clearly don't make sense. And as the data begins to accumulate, you can use that to inform your decisions about how many clicks am I getting on a particular search term before it converts or doesn't convert, and filter them out appropriately. So it's not uncommon to spend, like I said, 50 to 60% of your budget, at least initially, while you're doing research.
And is that a question of money, or is it a question of time? How long a research should be, or is it how much you should spend?
It's a good question. It's a little bit of both. It really depends on your goal. Again, coming back to that triangle, if efficiency is super important for you, then you're going to want to limit the proportion of your research spend, and you're sacrificing time. So it's going to take you a lot longer to then realize all of these search terms coming in and being able to filter them out. You'll hear about this often if you talk to people that have been advertising for a while. Auto campaigns eventually run out and die, right? Amazon is really good at finding new search terms, finding new products within auto campaigns. But if you're taking those keywords out, the ones that convert, and you're negating the ones that don't, eventually all that your auto campaign is going to do is pull in really tangential, irrelevant keywords that don't convert. And so you're really racing to that finish line.